Peace, love, liberty, radio.
And the walls come crashing down as the war at home reaches your town. You have no choice, it's safe and clean. We all submit to the war machine.
And then the war machine has an internal investigation on themselves to determine that they did nothing wrong. At least that's what generally happens, and that's what's going to happen in Saudi Arabia. You may recall I talked about on Friday the Saudi military having bombed yet another Doctors Without Borders hospital. This, as far as I am aware, is the third to be bombed within the past about 2.5 months. There was the hospital bombing in Kunduz, Afghanistan, where the U.S. military bombed a Doctors Without Borders hospital on October 3rd. And then within about a 1-week period of time, the Saudi military bombed 2 Doctors Without Borders hospitals in Yemen. But don't worry, folks. Do not worry, because the Saudi military is investigating themselves. That is the report from antiwar.com, that the Saudi government announced that it will form a fact-finding committee to investigate the December 3rd bombing of a Doctors Without Borders hospital in Yemen, a strike which wounded 9 people and destroyed the hospital. Those Saudi investigations don't have any better track record than most military's internal investigations. The move is still a surprise shift, as previously the Saudi government has responded to massive civilian casualties and airstrikes with blanket denials. The Saudi airstrikes against Yemen have killed thousands over the past 9 months, and that war shows no sign of resolution anytime soon. The U.S. backing for the Saudi strikes has only added to concerns about the humanitarian nightmare they are causing. What is the humanitarian nightmare being caused in Saudi Arabia, or rather in Yemen by Saudi Arabia? Well, in Yemen, because it's mostly desert, they have to import 90% of all of their food, which means that when something is a war zone and the country that is bombing you has set up a blockade along most of your coastland, which in the case of Yemen is half of their border. If you look at Yemen, they share a border with Saudi Arabia and Oman. To the south and to the west, there's the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, respectively. And, well, the Saudi military has set up a blockade, preventing aid and preventing, well, pretty much anything from getting into Yemen. So that is the nightmare. The humanitarian nightmare is that food and aid cannot get into Yemen because of Saudi Arabia. And now Saudi Arabia, for the last 9 months, has been killing people in Yemen. A lot of civilians, some people that are deemed to be Houthi rebels. And, well, they're, as I said, not letting any aid come into the country. And now they're bombing hospitals. So that is your humanitarian crisis in Yemen. Saudi officials seem likely to remain defiant even after announcing an investigation into the attack of the Doctors Without Borders site, issuing a separate statement warning aid agencies need to, quote unquote, remain away from places where the Houthi militias are present. Since this means most of Yemen, it suggests that the reckless airstrikes will continue. And we know that Saudi Arabia is what's the correct term here? A ally of the United States government, for probably a lack of a better term. Saudi Arabia is best buddies with the U.S. government. U.S. government gives the Saudi government millions of dollars every year, and, well, they're basically helping them bomb Yemen. So, in essence, the U.S. government is as complicit in the bombing of that hospital in Yemen as they are the one in Kunduz, Afghanistan, where it was actually U.S. military that carried out that strike. But again, I don't think we will ever wind up seeing anyone actually held liable for either of these incidents. And I would dare say that none of the war crimes committed by the U.S. military over the last, 80 years or so will probably never go punished. None of them will ever go punished in my lifetime is my prediction, but I wish that someone would prove me wrong. And speaking of U.S., this is not necessarily a war crime, but it's definitely a bad maneuver. Also comes from antiwar.com. The headline, U.S. looks to circumvent Iraqi Prime Minister's objection to new troops. Meaning that Barack Obama wants to send more troops into Iraq. The Iraqi Prime Minister, Haider Abadi, says, I'd really rather you not do that. But Barack Obama is basically saying, no, I think I want to anyway. The story, again, this comes from antiwar.com, and they write, when Defense Secretary Ash Carter announced the latest U.S. deployment of ground troops into Iraq, he set in motion a chain reaction within Iraq's political leadership that has some U.S. officials scrambling to protect Prime Minister Haider Abadi's increasingly precarious situation. Abadi was quick to object to the U.S. deployment, and it's clear why. A huge number of Shiite militias, many of them hugely politically powerful, are blasting the deployment and demanding the Abadi government do something to prevent them, warning they'll shift from fighting the Islamic State to fighting U.S. troops instead. U.S. officials are pretty sure they can circumvent Abadi's objections, but are trying to figure out the best way to do it without further weakening Abadi, who they still see as a vital ally. As one U.S. official noted, there are ways to make these things work. Key Iraqi member of parliament Sami Askari, an ally of Abadi, suggested in the future this could be accomplished by just not making public statements, saying the U.S. could easily add 100 or even 500 troops in it, so long as they aren't making high-profile announcements. So there you have one of the situations in Iraq, and there's another that I will talk about here momentarily. But you've got the Iraqi Prime Minister basically telling the U.S. government, hey, can you guys please not send any more troops in here? And an Iraqi member of parliament saying, all right, so here's how you get around the objection. You just send the troops, but you don't make an announcement about it. And that seems rather odd, if you ask me. But so does occupying another country and then saying, it's not an occupation, we're fighting the bad guys, and then keep changing who the bad guys are. Because that's really what's been happening in the Middle East for pretty much my entire lifetime, is the U.S. military fighting, quote-unquote, the bad guys, but they keep changing who the bad guys are. I recall back in the 80s when Saddam was our buddy, and then in the early 90s, Saddam was our enemy, and, well, we got rid of Saddam, and now the Iraqi government is kind of our buddy, but kind of not, and it's very, very strange. Stay tuned. There's more here on Peace, Love, Liberty Radio.
Bitcoin Not Bombs is a launching pad for nonprofits and social entrepreneurs into the financial freedom of the Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin Not Bombs offers premium publicity campaigns designed to facilitate an organization's adoption of Bitcoin as a payment system. Bitcoin Not Bombs is fully committed to being the hub of the nonprofit sector of the Bitcoin economy, maximizing the potential cross-promotion of all our clients and commercial partners. To learn more, visit bitcoinnotbombs.com. You can support FPP Radio by shopping online. Whether you're looking for precious metals, bitcoins, or books, you'll find that and more at shop.fppradio.com. Every purchase you make from one of my affiliates, like Namecheap, Spendabit, and Amazon at shop.fppradio.com helps fund FPP Radio. Or you can shop directly from FPP with Bitcoin in the Bitcoin store. That's shop.fppradio.com. The Doublespeak Dictionary by Leslie Starr O'Hara satirizes the marked difference between the ideal of we the people and the reality of we the elite, while offering an insightful glimpse into the clockworks of the totalitarian mind. Ever irreverent but never irrelevant, the Doublespeak Dictionary serves as a subversive and humorous but timely reminder that the emperor has no clothes. The Doublespeak Dictionary is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Daryl W. Perry. Online at fppradio.com.
Before I tell you about what Barack Obama said last night, I want to make sure that I tell you about a way that you can keep your money in the free economy. That is, if you use free market money. You do use Bitcoin, right? Because it is the best alternative to the fiat-centric world. If you use free market money and you use Bitcoin, then you need Spend-A-Bit in your arsenal. Spend-A-Bit is the search engine for things you can buy, you guessed it, with Bitcoin. Spend-A-Bit aggregates millions of products from thousands of Bitcoin-enabled merchants, including Overstock.com and FPP, so you can keep your money in the free economy when you spend a bit. Use my affiliate link, spendabit.fppradio.com, and if you're a Bitcoin-accepting merchant like I am, you should ask about their merchant suite to reach even more customers. Spendabit.fppradio.com. That's spendabit.fppradio.com. So apparently Barack Obama had a primetime television address on TV last night. That's generally where television, primetime television takes place, right, is on TV. Well, I did not watch it because I was busy with a Sunday night conference call that I've had for the last couple of months. But luckily, there are people that watch these things and report on these things. And Jason Dietz from antiwar.com is one of those people. And he has the following report. During his brief but heavily anticipated primetime address, President Obama insisted simultaneously that the San Bernardino attack last week was not connected to any terrorist group, but that it also represents a new phase of terrorism in which groups are turning to less complicated acts. So here's the first contradiction out of the drone bomber in chief. What happened in San Bernardino was not terrorism, or rather it was not connected to a terrorist group, but it was a new phase of terrorism in which groups are turning to less complicated acts. Obama then spent much of the address, despite having insisted that there was no connection to the Islamic State, in defending his ongoing strategy in the war against the Islamic State, and insisting that he does not want a major ground war in Iraq or Syria that would last a decade or more. Adding to the conflicting message of his address, Obama then urged Congress to grant him authorization for the war against the Islamic State, saying that it was time for them to demonstrate America's unity and that they are committed to this fight. Obama also confirmed U.S. Special Forces were being sent into both Iraq and Syria in growing numbers, trying to contrast that to the larger occupation of previous wars, though as he continues to slowly escalate his numbers, that distinction may be less and less significant. And reading this, it reminds me of 1984. Not the year 1984 when I was 6 years old, but the book, 1984. And if you've never read the book or listened to the book on tape or seen one of the movies, spoiler warning. I'm going to, sort of spoil something here. Now, they've got the Ministry of Truth, and it's a very aptly or wrongly named entity because the Ministry of Truth is known for falsifying things. And they will take information and put it down what's called the memory hole. So they will go through, and one example that they give is that the chocolate ration is being increased to 15 grams per week. But Winston Smith, the main character of the book, he recalls that the chocolate ration had been 20 grams per week. Wait, 20 is more than 15, right? Well, no, the Ministry of Truth says it's being increased to 15 grams per week. It must be true. That's coming from the Ministry of Truth. So here you have the drone bomber in chief keeps increasing the number of troops that he wants to send to Iraq and Syria while saying that I'm not sending as many troops as in previous wars, even though the number is somewhere, it's definitely getting closer to what that number was in quote-unquote previous wars, even though there has not been an official war in Iraq or Syria or, well, anywhere else in the world from the U.S. government since the World War II, which officially ended, I believe the final treaty on that was signed in early 1946 or late 1945. But in either case, it's been nearly 70 years since there has been an official war that the U.S. military has been involved in. But I guess that's arguing semantics. The article here from antiwar.com continues. It says, beyond this, that being the I need an authorization of use of military force to go kill people in the Islamic State, that we're going to be sending more troops, but it's not going to be a major ground war that's going to last a decade or more, and I'm going to send fewer troops than in previous wars, but I'm going to keep increasing the number. Beyond that, Obama also urged Congress to ban anyone on any no-fly list from buying a gun and to heavily restrict the buying of more advanced, quote, assault weapons by everyone, insisting that U.S. intelligence agencies can't catch all attackers, but they can make it harder for them to obtain weapons. Well, let me, just before finishing the article, jump in here and say they can make it harder for people to obtain weapons legally. You're never going to prevent the people that aren't going to follow the laws in the first place from obtaining weapons. You're not going to ever prevent people that aren't going to follow laws from obtaining drugs. And this is something I was on a radio show on Saturday, a podcast. I'll post the link in the show notes. I was on to discuss my presidential campaign. And one of the questions that was asked was about gun control and if I think that stricter gun control would wind up preventing attacks like what happened in San Bernardino. And the answer that I gave is, it's really interesting because you've got the people on one side saying, well, gun control laws don't work because, criminals will always wind up getting guns and you're just preventing law-abiding people, blah, blah, blah. But we need drug laws. And then you've got people on the other side saying, drug laws don't work. People are always going to wind up getting the drugs they want, but we need laws preventing people from getting guns. And they don't notice, neither side, neither the Republicans nor the Democrats, notice their own hypocrisy and doublethink on this of we have to ban this thing that I don't like because then nobody will use it. But this thing I do like, well, it doesn't matter how many laws there are. People are still going to get them. And Barack, it doesn't matter how many laws you have. People that want weapons will get them, whether they're on a no-fly list or not. And by the way, you've got people on this no-fly list that are on there incorrectly because they happen to have a name similar to somebody else. Stay tuned. There's more.
When her plush and comfy life suddenly and unexpectedly fell apart, Brooke and her dog Cloud set out to defy the odds. If this is a man's world, as they say, living on the streets is no place for a young woman. One day she awoke in the redwood forest and realized she had become a hobo, and would ultimately come to know exactly what it means to survive. How to Be a Hobo by Brooke Willett is available from Amazon.com and all major bookstores.
Hey, this is Michael Dean from the Freedom Fiends radio show. I've been working with computer programmer Derek Slopey to create Fiend Phone. I'm using Fiend Phone right now to talk with and record one of my co-hosts in real time. Take it, Davi.
Hey, this is Davi Barker, and I'm 1,000 miles away from Michael, but we sound like we're in the same room.
We sure do, Davi. So, Davi, please tell the nice people more about Fiend Phone.
Fiend Phone is free, open-source software that opens up a global world of possibilities for collaborative, high-quality remote voice media production, and I'm digging it.
People can try the Windows beta version of Fiend Phone right now at fiendphone.com. But we're also raising money to vastly improve Fiend Phone and vastly improve independent talk media worldwide.
So go to fiendphone.com to help out. Who will build the audio roads? We will, with your help.
That's fiendphone.com. FEENPHONE.com. Foxtrot, Echo, November, phone.com.
Fiend Phone. I never knew remote audio could be this good.
You're listening to Peace, Love, Liberty Radio with Daryl W. Perry.
Finishing up this article from antiwar.com real quick. Obama also promised to seek more unity among countries fighting in Syria, saying that the U.S. government would call on their allies and also Russia to step up the battle, while suggesting that some sort of diplomatic settlement of the Syrian civil war could be on the horizon. And hopefully all of the fighting that happens around the globe comes to an end soon. I'm not going to hold my breath, but I do see a little bit of hope here that there's not going to be a second Cold War, because that was the fear there for a while, right? When Russia started bombing places in Syria and Turkey and northern Iraq, territory claimed by the Islamic State. The fear was, oh no, Russia's trying to start World War III because they're stepping on the toes of the U.S. military and they're doing a better job of killing targets and killing blah, blah, blah and blowing stuff up. And what I was thinking was, okay, people are wanting to basically start another Cold War because, well, I remember when I was a kid, Russia was the enemy. And, well, then communism fell in Russia, and, well, they weren't really the enemy anymore. But we need to have a bad guy because every superhero needs that villain, right? What's the point of being a superhero if you don't have a villain? And I feel like I'm sort of summoning my inner Jerry Seinfeld of making poignant observations that aren't that funny, but they're rather obvious, right? So, like, what's the point of being the world's police if you don't have robbers? Well, what's the deal with superheroes that don't have a villain? And so people were looking for Russia to be that villain, but hopefully that winds up not happening. And, I don't want anybody to be the villain. I want peace, freedom, and commerce with everybody and entangling alliances with none. Now, since Obama did talk about guns and how he wants to prevent anyone on a no-fly list from buying one and to heavily restrict everyone's ability to obtain what he classifies as an assault weapon, well, there's some kind of good news maybe out of Puerto Rico on the right to keep and bear arms. And that story comes from Breitbart. And somehow I missed this. This court ruling came out in June, but it just came across my desk, for lack of a better term, came across my Facebook feed just a couple of days ago. The story comes from Breitbart, and they report on June 19th, a Puerto Rican Commonwealth court abolished the territory's registry and licensing requirements for firearms, thereby making the Second Amendment the only requisite And yeah, that's the term used here. That does not seem to be the correct term. But it says making the Second Amendment the only requisite necessary to carry firearms openly or concealed. And that's the thing that a lot of people are searching for and looking for and trying to get legislative bodies to pass, is allowing concealed carry without a permit. Now, there are some places, New Hampshire being one of them, to where you can open carry, no requirements of having any kind of license or permit or notifying anybody at a government agency, but not everybody wants to open carry. And there are valid reasons to open carry. There are valid reasons to conceal carry. And I think it should be, personal choice which one you do. And, well, in Puerto Rico now, a court has recognized the right to conceal carry without any government papers. The suit was brought by the Ladies of the Second Amendment, LSA, which is affiliated with the Second Amendment Foundation, SAF, an entity that I am a life member of. This is me speaking, not the article. I am a life member of the Second Amendment Foundation. That's one of the few entities that I am a life member of. The others being the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and the Libertarian Party. Now let me jump back into the article. The suit brought by the Ladies of the Second Amendment, which is affiliated with the Second Amendment Foundation through the International Association for the Protection of Civilian Arms Rights. The suit also involved approximately 850 individual plaintiffs. According to the Second Amendment Foundation, the Puerto Rican court cited District of Columbia v. Heller from 2008 and McDonald v. Chicago 2010 in making its decision. Heller is the case in which the U.S. Supreme Court struck down the D.C. gun ban as a federal district violation of the right to self-defense, and McDonald is the case in which the Supreme Court ruled that gun rights are incorporated and therefore as equal protection from state violations as they are from federal. In light of the Puerto Rican court's decision, there is currently no regulation to purchase or carry, and all purchases will be handled in accordance with federal firearms regulations. Second Amendment Foundation President Alan Gottlieb commented on the decision. Cumbersome firearms regulations have never prevented criminals from getting their hands on guns. They have only inconvenienced law-abiding citizens or deprived them outright from exercising their rights under the Second Amendment. And let me just jump in here for a moment. Most people think that the Second Amendment is only about guns, but they would be wrong. The Second Amendment says the right to keep and bear arms. And what exactly are arms? Well, aside from the things on your the sides of your body sprouting from your shoulders, arms are pretty much any form of weaponry. Back in the olden days, arms would include swords, knives, any other form of a sword. Would also include things such as bow and arrow, archery sort of things. The definition, noun, arms, the definition of arms as a noun, weapons and ammunitions, armaments. So they then give synonyms. What are the synonyms? Weapons, weaponry, firearms, guns, ordnances, artillery, armaments, munitions, material. And then material with that little weird slash thing over the E, which implies that would be probably a French word. But yeah, so basically anything that you can use to defend yourself would be considered arms, meaning that you have the right under the Second Amendment, or actually you have the right and it's recognized by the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, arms being things used to defend yourself, meaning that in addition to guns, you have the right, and it's recognized by the U.S. government, or rather it should be, you have the right to also keep and bear knives, swords, flail mace, anything that would be a defensive weapon. The article here has a little bit of information about states that do allow concealed carry without a permit, and I'll post that link in the show notes. And don't forget, every Wednesday I answer your questions. Send those over, AMA@fppradio.com.